Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you everyone for joining us for today's presentation. And today we're talking about DRAAS, or Disaster Recovery as a Service, and how you can protect your clients from ransomware and other outages and other disasters as well, of course. My name is Carla Federigo, and I'm the Director of Marketing at Infrascale. I've been here nearly 5 years. And I have all of my contact info that I'll share with you as well here on the next slide. Just a couple of quick housekeeping announcements before we dive in and get started. First is that if you'd like to receive a copy of these slides, simply use the question tool and type in your email address there. I'll email them over to you right after the presentation. Also, we are recording today, so if you'd like to view a replay video or have access to that, that will be posted on our website within about 24 hours. You'll be able to see that at infrascale.com/webinars, and we have all of our replay videos there. Lastly, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, just use the question tool within the software. So you should have access to that in GoToWebinar and be seeing that there. So you can type in any questions or comments throughout the presentation, and we will come to Q&A as well at the end. All right, so I did mention I wanted to share my contact info with you, and you have here my email address, Twitter, LinkedIn. I would love to hear from you. Please do reach out to me, and you'll have a copy of this in the handouts as well with all the slides. Okay, the agenda for today, taking a look at everything here. First, we're going to discuss the threat of ransomware, and just look at some numbers, some stats and figures on ransomware so that we all sort of level set, we're all on the same page as we get started and dive in. We're then going to talk about DRAAS specifically and how DRAAS is your best contingency plan. We're also going to talk about what features you want to be looking for in a DRAAS solution. We'll talk about the Infrascale solution as well, so that you then have all the information and you're equipped with the knowledge of what tools you should be looking for and what functionality you want in a DRAAS solution. And then we'll have a Q&A. So if there's anything that you wanted to hear that you don't see on this agenda, just go ahead and use the question tool and let me know. So if there are any particular comments or items that you definitely want addressed, or information that you were hoping to hear on today's presentation, then just type that into the question tool and I'll make sure to address that, and we'll make sure to talk about that today. So starting with a basic understanding here of what ransomware is and what are these different strains of ransomware that I've heard of. This is sort of just a way to get everyone on the same page, just to level set here. Ransomware is a malware that alters files by encrypting them. And then in order to get that data back, you either recover from a backup or you pay the ransom. So we've all seen the headlines when it comes to these ransomware strains. We've seen Locky, WannaCry, NotPetya. One of the growing problems that we've been seeing more and more is the introduction of ransomware as a service. And this is now making ransomware accessible to nearly anybody. So the barrier to entry is lowered, and it means that when it comes to cyber crimes, nearly anybody can get their hands on it now. So these cyber criminals are realizing that ransomware is cheap to purchase and to download, and it has a quicker payout than other types of theft. And then there's a much lower risk of being caught because of the anonymity of Bitcoin. So this ransomware as a service has really been ramping up. And what's really important to understand is how ransomware gets into your customers' organizations, and then how you can protect your clients from the threat of ransomware and the downtime due to that ransomware. So this is what we're going to talk about today. Right now, we're all at risk, right? So we want to have a proper solution in place. Now, I want to touch on negotiating with the hackers, because since the rise of ransomware as a service, that what we're going through now, negotiating has become a business in and of itself. And we see things now like web pages that are offering advice. We see ransomware customer service for victims who have questions. And then we see phone lines that are set up to help with making payments. So in this example here that we're actually taking a look at, this is a police department in Mississippi that experienced a ransomware attack. Their servers were infected while working on a case with the FBI. And the FBI just said, well, pay it, right? But the police chief was just blown away by this fact that the FBI couldn't even help them. So they called in, they were walked through the process of buying Bitcoin and paying the ransom. And so, you know, the police chief ends up talking to this person committing the crime, and he and law enforcement could do nothing. So we understand the threat and the risks associated with ransomware, but why do organizations end up paying the ransom, and why was the FBI recommending we'll just pay it? So what we see is a few different reasons that those ransoms get paid, but one really common reason is that the data was never backed up, or maybe the backups were too old. And then another reason is maybe the recovery attempts failed. So if there was no testing done, no valid backups, no viable backups that were actually working, right? Another reason is just the process itself is broken. If it takes longer to recover, and if it's more costly to go through that recovery process than simply paying the ransom, then likely as a business you're going to opt for that option. So if it takes 4 days to recover data and it only costs $1,000 to release the ransom, that's what we're looking at here. So that's how ransomware actually cripples a business. Here are some of the numbers associated with ransomware and downtime. The cost of downtime associated with a ransomware attack far eclipses the actual cost of the ransom. And ransomware, when you factor in operational downtime, staffing resources, replacement of systems, ransomware is actually costing businesses more than $75 billion per year. And that's a staggering figure, right? And so what this is teaching us about traditional best practices of recovering from a backup is, you know, that process just isn't sufficient if you get infected. With a cloud backup solution, it would take 4 to 5 hours to restore a production database. But DRAAS takes minutes. So let's look at this approach a little bit closer. But before we do that, I have a quick poll that I'd like to launch and hear from you. So you've heard a bit from me, and I'm going to launch this poll to hear from you. So simply asking, which data protection challenge are you facing the most? And if you'd like to participate in this poll, go ahead and reach forward, select one of those options there. A, meeting RTO or RPO. B, data sprawl, ensuring everything's protected. C, proper disaster recovery planning against ransomware. And D, a proper ransomware mitigation strategy. So I'll give everyone another moment to answer here. We have 50% of you voted so far. Okay, we've got 65% of you have voted so far. I'll give everyone a moment here. If they'd like to participate, go ahead and last chance to reach forward, select one of these options to participate in this poll, and then we will close this poll down and I'll share the results. Okay, so let's take a look at the results here. We have 25% of you had answered A, meeting RTO or RPO. Nobody answered B, data sprawl, so it seems like that's not a large concern today with this audience that we have. About 50% of you answered C, a proper disaster recovery planning against ransomware. That's the biggest challenge. And then 25% answering a ransomware mitigation strategy. All right. Okay, let me hide those results. Thank you, everyone, for your participation there. We should be back on the slides here. So what you should be seeing now is a slide titled "The Real Threat of Ransomware." If you're not seeing that slide for any reason, use the question tool to let me know, and I'll make sure to adjust that screen share there. So what we're looking at here, it's not the ransom that's so damaging to your customers, right? It's the downtime associated with that ransomware. What we're seeing is that we look at these attacks, one big reason they're so successful is that the ransom demanded is normally a quite small amount in comparison to the size of the business. So since that's the case, the ransomware quietly creeps into a business and then they'll quietly pay it in order to stay in production. So most ransomware attacks we never even hear of. And here are the side-by-side comparisons to backup versus DRAAS to make sure we're all on the same page with what we're looking at. When you're dealing with a ransomware threat, you know that time is your worst enemy, right? So the faster that you can detect it, the more time you have to take action and restore your database and mission-critical apps. So that's why simple backup procedures will take significantly longer than a modern DRAAS solution. With cloud backup, 4 to 5 hours is going to be your best case scenario. And part of the reason is when it comes to restoring applications and production databases from a backup, it requires lots of planning and coordination. So this is along the top half of the screen here. If you have a backup system, you need to find a clean point from which to restore. Then you need to get the hardware to recover, set up the machine, recover the data, test for viability, and if it's not viable, you need to start that whole process over before restoring to production. So just taking a look at all these steps involved, it's exhausting, right? That's going to take 4 to 5 hours, best case scenario in total downtime. But let's look at the bottom half of the screen here. If you have a DRAAS system, you can simultaneously cloud boot multiple versions of the same machine to determine a safe version to recover. And then you can boot either to the cloud, a virtual environment, or recover to production hardware. So here, drastic difference, right? No pun intended. The total downtime is about 1 to 2 minutes. And that's saving you a ton of time and money because of the simplicity of these steps. Now, the Infrascale DRAAS solution includes built-in failover orchestration as well, and that lets you create predetermined failover plans. They can be scheduled to boot simultaneously or in a specific order, but we're not going to look at that just yet. We are going to take a look at that in a minute, but rather than just talk through it, I want to give you a real example. This is what I'm calling here a tale of two ransomware victims. And this happened last fall. These two businesses got infected with ransomware in the same week. And these two businesses were customers of an Infrascale partner. Now, their experiences were very, very different because of the underlying infrastructure and the safeguards that they had in place, right? So let's take a look at these two solutions side by side. Now, the first, or the two companies, I should say. So the first company was a retailer, and the IT admin realized that they'd been infected by ransomware. He noticed most of the files within a file share were inaccessible. So they determined how many PCs were infected and started scanning the network, but it was really difficult for them to identify the point of entry of that malware. And then on top of that, the on-site backup was infected with the malware too. So that prevented a recovery. And they did not have a DRAAS solution in place, so they had to restore clean files from a secondary SAN, one file at a time. So because of all this, they were only semi-operational, not even fully operational, within 2 to 3 days. So their email and ERP systems were up and running within 48 hours, but the non-mission critical apps and the file shares, they weren't fully restored for another 2 weeks. So let's look at the secondary, the second company. The second company was a manufacturer. And again, both customers of an Infrascale partner. Now, the manufacturer was infected with ransomware the very next day. But a very drastic difference because the manufacturer had already moved into the Infrascale DRAAS solution. So the ransomware, it spread when a finance clerk clicked on an email attachment. So they just mistakenly assumed it was an invoice that needed to be paid. And then that malware, of course, it spread like wildfire. Almost 500,000 files were encrypted in less than 6 minutes. But big difference here. So, they were using the Infrascale solution, and they were able to pinpoint the machine that had been infected. They scanned the PCs and the servers on the network and determined the extent of the infection, and then they began recovering clean versions of the infected files. So they could actually spin up VMs of the backups from the local on-prem appliance instead of manually restoring files one at a time. So they were able to restore the infected file servers, email, and ERP within 5 minutes using Infrascale Disaster Recovery. Now, generally speaking, before you even have that DRAAS solution in place, when it comes to ransomware, the best approach really is three-pronged, right? So companies do need a comprehensive data protection plan. You want to address security best practices a few different ways. So yes, regular patching, AV protection, cloud backup, they're all part of that plan, but not good enough on their own. So you should be making sure that end users are trained how to recognize phishing attacks, suspicious attachments and links, and then have a mitigation plan in place to be able to isolate the infection when it hits and utilize a disaster recovery as a service solution to quickly recover your customers' files and running systems when they get infected. So essentially, ransomware should be treated as an impending disaster, right? The same process as planning for a tornado or a hurricane. And part of mitigating that damage is to have a good backup of that data, backup your customers' data and systems, and be able to roll back to a date before the ransomware hit, recover without having to pay the ransom. And a big part of this too is you want the frequency of that backup to be no less than 30-minute increments. I should say, sorry, no more than 30-minute increments. So if you have a 24-hour backup policy, you know, every evening, then you have 24 hours worth of data at risk. So when you're looking at the RTO or RPO, and that was, again, in that last poll that we did here, 25% of you were concerned about meeting RTO and RPO. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more, but that's something to keep in mind. You want the frequency of your backup to be no more than 30-minute increments. Now, to go beyond just traditional backup and DR, because we know now that, you know, traditional approaches to backup simply don't work against ransomware. And that's where disaster recovery as a service comes in, DRAAS. And, you know, I've been talking a little bit about DRAAS, but haven't quite given the specifics, and that's what we are going to get into now. DRAAS replicates and protects your entire environment, not just files and folders. So it lets you quickly fail over your systems to ensure uptime, ensure availability. You know, anytime that something goes wrong, like in a ransomware attack, any outage, you really should be treating this the same as a hurricane, a tornado, a fire, or flood. But there are many, many different ways to define a DRAAS solution. And so there are various ways to back up and recover critical systems and data. Organizations have different security and compliance requirements. And there are different levels of flexibility in backup targets and recovery options. And then not to mention the need to control failback procedures and orchestration policies as well, right? So we're going to look a little bit at how the Infrascale DRAAS solution works and talk about some of these different features and functionality. You know, what should you be looking for in any DRAAS solution? Because no matter what provider or solution you go with, we simply want to ensure that your customer's data is protected and that you're the IT hero, right? So we're going to talk a little bit more now about the Infrascale solution, but you don't have to take my word for it. Leading analyst firm Gartner named Infrascale a leader in the 2017 DRAAS Magic Quadrant that was released towards the end of June, so just a little over a month ago. And so everything that I'm going to share has been, verified and vetted by the experts at Gartner. So what I first want to introduce you to is anomaly detection. And this technology is built into the Infrascale solution. So the screenshots that you see here are directly from the Infrascale dashboard, our centralized management dashboard. So what is anomaly detection? Well, what we're doing is we're monitoring backup activity, and we're looking at the patterns of data change. So in other words here, we're looking at how frequently is the data changing. Now, when ransomware goes through your system, it's going to modify all the files that it touches. So if it's a file that's being backed up, it will be recognized as a changed file. So in this analysis here, essentially we're monitoring the normal number of changed files per day. And if you suddenly see a spike where a much larger number of files has been changed, then an alert's going to be released. So you can proactively see the threat of data encryption to your customers before that ransom is ever posted or ever demanded to them. And when we send an alert out to you as an admin, you can then, detect the issue before the threat hits, roll back to a clean data environment faster, obviously far less data loss, avoid paying those high ransoms. And this is really, really important because most of the solutions out there today don't have this proactive warning system in place. Most are going to tell you they can't detect it, but they can work to remediate it, right? But we can do both. The other piece of functionality that I wanted to touch on, I mentioned this earlier and I said we'll come back to it. Well, here we are talking about orchestration. This is a key differentiator in DR solution providers, okay? And that's how to deliver orchestration and deliver the orderly recovery of a server environment. So orchestration is going to ensure that critical servers, applications, and devices all come online in the proper sequence based on their dependencies. And it's going to allow you to completely restore your customer's networking configuration on the DR site. So one of our latest releases earlier this year, last quarter actually, we introduced this visual designer for drag and drop orchestration. And this is right within the dashboard. So again, this screenshot here, it's under the boot tab where you'll see a page for orchestration and a list of all the bootable machines. So then they can be dragged over to the diagram design surface. They can be rearranged, adding wait times, adding delays between boots, creating different boot groups to run, either together simultaneously or with wait times in between. So that drag and drop functionality, like you see here, you can also specify the network configuration settings for these machines. So you see the little button here, right in the center of the screen, more or less, the LAN configuration settings. And there you can specify the subnet, gateway, DNS servers, DHCP range. You can enable or disable outbound internet access. So you have all of this functionality at your fingertips. And again, no matter what DR solution you choose, it's so important to understand exactly how the solution plans to fail over your applications and then fail back, right? In addition to how much customization and how much control you have over that whole process. So Infrascale offers two services, cloud backup and disaster recovery. And I want to touch on the difference and the similarities between the two. So Infrascale Cloud Backup is a direct-to-cloud solution. It's oriented around data and bare metal image backup. And this is typically for endpoint data protection for laptops, for mobile devices. And it's optimized for small to medium businesses and their servers, as well as maybe remote or branch offices and mid-market companies. Now, Infrascale Disaster Recovery is a hybrid cloud solution that includes an on-premise component, and we're going to see that in just a moment, as well as the cloud. So, of course, you can back up data, but it goes further in capturing full system images and allowing you to boot and run those images on a local appliance or in the cloud, depending on what you need. And we've already done all the work behind the scenes in order to prepare those images and ensure that they're able to run in the cloud, even though they were originally installed and running on a local physical server. Now, as far as the specifics, taking a look at everything that we support, we protect any device. That could be laptops, tablets, mobile devices, across Windows and Mac, iPhones, Androids. We also include end-to-end functionality, mobile device management, for functionality like geolocate and remote wipe of those devices as well. And this includes servers, both physical and virtual servers. So we support physical servers running Windows, Linux, Unix. We support virtual servers on VMware, Hyper-V, and KVM. And we support more than 100 different operating systems. That's the broadest support footprint that you'll find in the industry, hands down. And when it comes to recovery targets, we support any cloud or a prepackaged appliance as well. So you can use one of Infrascale's 15 global data centers, or you can use your own private cloud if you have your own infrastructure, or you can use third-party clouds. So our software runs with Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, Windows, Azure, and IBM software, which is now Bluemix, right? So overall, this is our mission here at Infrascale. We guarantee system failover from any disaster in 15 minutes or less, and we do it at a fraction of the cost. So this 15-minute failover guarantee is something that nobody in the industry currently offers. And what's really interesting about our specific approach to ransomware is that proactive warning system that I showed you, the anomaly detection technology, also the orchestration technology that we have built in. And let's take a look at exactly how this works. So Infrascale offers on-demand failover, right? A 15-minute guarantee at a fraction of the cost. Well, here's how we do it. So in this situation, here are some end users simply working along on their production systems, and we'll install the Infrascale Disaster Recovery solution. So a hybrid cloud solution. There's the on-premise failover appliance, and that's installed locally. And this could be a virtual appliance, or it might be a physical appliance. And we have a cloud-based service like would run on any public or private cloud, right? So we're going to capture these systems to the appliance first. We are then going to dedupe them to compress the amount of data that's stored. We're going to replicate those systems up to the cloud. So we now have two copies of those systems. We have one locally on the appliance and one centrally located on the cloud. So let's envision one system were to go down, and you as the admin, you could fail over just a few clicks of the mouse in the dashboard, and you could fail over to the local appliance. You could bring back the most recent point or replica of that system, and the users then continue working with that application or that server. Yeah? So let's now assume that there is a site-wide infection or attack. So that local appliance is no longer available either. But that's okay. We use that exact same process, just a few clicks through in the dashboard, and from here we're going to fail over instead to the cloud. So we'll bring up a full virtual environment that replicates exactly what was on premise, and now the users will continue working by interacting with those cloud-based systems. So Infrascale offers a cloud DRAAS solution where all backups are replicated off-site to allow much faster recovery, a cloud-based recovery, right, of entire machines, and your customers can continue to work while you fix the production environment and get that repaired. Now, with all that in mind, let's take a look at the actual recovery time for Infrascale protected systems. So I mentioned just now our 15-minute failover guarantee, and you might think, okay, this is too good to be true. But here we are on our website. This is all live on our site, putting our money where our mouth is, and this is actual recovery times of systems protected by Infrascale Disaster Recovery. And I simply pulled this data from, let's see, it looks like I pulled this data in May. This is live on our site to view at any time. How to read this is that essentially what this is we call it our cloud boot histogram. So it shows all the historical data here for every system recovered on the date shown. So for each date on the x-axis, there's a green or a red bubble. And the green bubble is going to represent systems successfully recovered. The red bubble, on the other hand, shows systems not recovered, meaning that they didn't boot up successfully. And if there's no bubble on that day, it means that there were no systems recovered that day. And then the size of the bubble is going to correspond to the number of systems that were recovered. So the bubble's position on the y-axis shows the average time that it took to recover all the systems on that day. And you can then mouse over each bubble to see the actual number of systems and average recovery time. The largest bubble toward the left represents 65 cloud boots at an average of 1 minute recovery time. And that's just the average. Now take a look at the time along the y-axis. We're looking at 0 to 5 minutes. So you can see that all of these the high majority of these recoveries are under 5 minutes. There's only one that goes above 5 minutes. And that's really showing how we stick to our 15-minute failover guarantee. A little more about Infrascale as a company. We're using intelligent software with built-in global deduplication, compression, and WAN acceleration technologies. And we've eliminated expensive hardware since you can bolt on an unlimited amount of cloud space for long-term storage, and we're using intelligent cloud spillover. It's all a low monthly subscription simply based on the number of terabytes protected. So you only pay for what you protect. And us as a company, we were founded in 2011. Right now we're active in over 170 countries. We have 15 globally dispersed data centers all over the world. And at a very high level, here's the entire process. So from the bottom up, we're seeing Infrascale Cloud Backup and Infrascale Disaster Recovery. Now the next layer up, we're seeing the source system that we're trying to protect, whether it be Windows or Linux or Unix systems, VMware, Hyper-V. In either case here, there's going to be an agent that is installed. So you have a software agent on the machine, or in the case of virtual environments with VMware, it'd be a direct connection to their API. And in the case of Hyper-V, it'd be a host level or hypervisor level agent. So then we're going to capture those systems. In the case of DR, we're going to capture those systems to an on-prem appliance. We're going to deduplicate there, and then we're going to replicate that data to the cloud. So there you're going to have 2 copies of that data. And in the case of cloud backup, we're going to dedupe the data and directly send it to the cloud of your choosing. Everything here is administered through our central web-based dashboard, so you can log in from any browser, even on a laptop, a tablet, or a smartphone. And in that dashboard, you can access those orchestration policies that we looked at a moment ago. You can access the anomaly detection technology that we looked at. Everything is going to be available there. Now here's a look at our encryption system, because we do take security very seriously. And your customer's data is going to be encrypted at 256-bit AES locally. It's sent over an SSL, and then it's encrypted again at 256-bit AES at rest. And if you want to take it a step further, we have an UltraSafe Max option as well, where you can define the encryption key itself, so you have lots of control over that. And all of our data centers are going to enable compliance with HIPAA, SSAE 16, FINRA, SOX, CJIS, many other regulations as well. So if you are subject to any regulatory frameworks by your customers, or if your customers are subject to any regulatory frameworks, you really want to make sure that the vendor you choose has that compliance factor built right in, right? Now, taking a look at our approach, we see it's getting a lot of attention. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier for those of you who joined later. Leading analyst firm Gartner named Infrascale a 2017 leader in the Disaster Recovery as a Service Magic Quadrant. And we are gaining momentum with Gartner as well. So in 2015, we were named a cool vendor in business continuity and disaster recovery. Then in 2016, we were named a visionary in disaster recovery as a service. And then now 2017, we're named a leader in this space. And, you know, take a look at the other leaders. You see SunGard, IBM. We are a fraction of the cost of these large providers. Now, I do have one more quick poll that I'd like to run here. So you've heard and seen a bit from me. Let's launch this next poll here. So are you considering any data protection projects in the next 12 months? A, yes, we're evaluating solutions. B, yes, we're interested, but we haven't started looking. C, no, we're fine today, just here learning. So I'll give everyone a moment to participate in this poll if they'd like to. Go ahead and reach forward and we have about 67% of you have voted so far. And now we're up to 70% of you voted so far. Okay, I'll give everyone one more moment to reach forward here if they'd like to participate. And for those of you, it looks like the vast majority, okay, let me go ahead and close this poll down. We do have the majority of you have voted. 75% answered A, yes, we're evaluating solutions. Nobody answered B, and then 25%, no, we're fine today and just here learning. So it's always great, of course, to get the information, stay on top of it, know what's out there, know what features and what pieces of functionality you want to be looking for. Now, those of you who had answered A, since 75% of you answered A, which solutions are you currently evaluating? Use the question tool to let me know. Type something in there to share which solutions you're evaluating. I'd love to hear from you. And in the meantime, while I let everyone do that, I'll give everyone a moment to find the question tool and type in their comments. And then we'll come back to the presentation. So you now should be seeing the presentation again here. So why partner with Infrascale? We're going to turn now and shift towards talking a little bit more about our partner program. Now, here's the global coverage that Infrascale has. Each red dot represents a business that we're protecting. And Infrascale has about 1,000 channel partners right now. And in turn, We have over 1 million devices protected and counting. And through those 1,000 channel partners, we have about 50,000 customers worldwide. And so you can see that clearly with each red dot. You see a large focus here in North America, the UK and Europe, Australia. So these are, oh, and I see, I'm looking at the comments now. I'm reading the comments that are popping up here on my screen. Looks like, let's see, first comment, we're evaluating solutions. We're a reseller. That category needs to be added to the polling question. Yep. Okay, will do. We'll make sure to add that in there. I see some other comments coming through with solutions that are being evaluated, and they look like they're all across the board here. I'll come back to that. I'll come back to the comments and questions here in just one moment. Okay, so aside from this global coverage, let's take a look at our partner program. So we have a world-class partner program, and first off, we are completely channel-focused. We never compete with our partners, and what we are able to do is any potential leads that come our way, we will essentially take to that 10-yard line and then essentially match it up with one of our current partners. So we're not in competition with you. We're instead working with you and helping with leads and with marketing. We have lots of co-marketing events that we run with our partners as well, and MDF funds. So our partner onboarding program is going to guarantee partner success. We have an onboarding program with an implementation success team and a partner success team that's going to get all of the details ready for that first deployment and make sure that everything is up and running properly with the policies and procedures that you want in place. We also have an innovative pricing model. We offer great margins for our partners, very flexible and essentially just really simple pricing. You know, rather than a long list of SKUs and like a Chinese menu needing to pick what you want, you simply have a very easy, simple pricing solution where you only pay for what you protect, simply based on the number of terabytes that there are to protect. So the pricing is very easy. We offer market development funds to our partners as well. We offer co-marketing, collateral, emails, templates, videos, events, webinars. So there are lots of great reasons to partner with Infrascale, not just these three here. But with all of that in mind, I'd love to jump into the Q&A now. We have a few minutes left, and I have one last poll that I'd like to launch here. So would you like to learn more about Infrascale Disaster Recovery, Infrascale Cloud Backup, or both Infrascale Disaster Recovery and Cloud Backup? And right now we have about 65% of you voted. Great. 78% of you have voted. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for participating here in this poll. And let me turn to the Q&A now here. Let's see if we have any questions coming through. And the Q&A looks very quiet as well. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for participating in these polls. Thank you for your time and your attendance and joining me here today. I very much appreciate it. And I also very much look forward to working with you and partnering with you in the future. So we'll finish a few minutes early today, and I hope that everyone has a great day and look forward to working with you soon. Thanks, everyone.